Hi, it's Nero here, and by now you're aware that in 2023 we are continuing to face multiple economic crises. We've got banks going broke, we've got a cost of living crisis, we've got inflation crises, interest rates rising, etc., etc. The list goes on, and you've seen news reports about them, you've probably seen other YouTube videos, heard podcasts about all of this, but here's what no one else that I'm aware of is talking about. These economic crises have exposed three fallacies, three falsehoods about building wealth that almost all of us were taught to do when we were growing up. And if you think I'm exaggerating, see if this sounds familiar. You're someone who is a good, hard-working person. You work hard at your job, you try to manage your cash flow as best you can, and yet you find yourself struggling to achieve your financial goals. Maybe life is comfortable, but you don't see any way to break through to the next level, or maybe you're struggling financially right now. Wherever you are, if you find that you are unable to achieve your financial goals based on what you're doing, even though you're doing everything that you were taught to, everything that you believe that is right, then this episode is for you, because I'm going to share with you three of these wealth building fallacies, and if you stay until the end, I'll share with you a 3-step blueprint to break out of this system, flip it on its head, and actually start to build wealth so you can achieve your financial goals. So let's get started. Wealth building fallacy number 1, you can save your way to wealth. Here's an article that talks about what happened during the GFC of 2008. And in particular, I want to bring your attention to these two paragraphs. Australian Prudential and Regulation Authority figures from 2008 show Commonwealth Bank's deposits from households surged by almost $7.4 billion or 7% from the start of August to the end of October 2008, while at Westpac Banking Corp, deposits from households rose by $8.3 billion or 17% over the same period. We were being swamped by deposits. My funding base got incredibly rich. I had deposits coming out of my ears. It was the fastest deposit growth I have ever seen, said Phil Coffey, the Chief Financial Officer of Westpac during the crisis. Hold on. The Chief Financial Officer of Westpac, one of Australia's biggest 4 banks, says my funding base got incredibly rich. In other words, a senior official at a major bank is talking about your money or people like you putting money into the bank as if it's his money. What does that mean? Well, when we deposit money into the bank doesn't just keep it all there in the vault for us to then go and take out whenever we want to. No, right? It uses our money, our savings, in order to then lend it out to make money, to pay their bills, and of course, make a profit. So, in other words, we give our money to the bank, which essentially means we're lending our money to the bank. That's why they give us an interest rate. Mind you, it's a real piddly little interest rate. And then they lend our savings out. They invest our savings and get a bigger return. And what are some of these things that they lend out on and invest in? Well, mortgages. So, they give you, I don't know, maybe 3% these days on your savings, and they lend money at 6% on a residential mortgage. Maybe if you want to open up a restaurant or build a commercial premises, they'll give it to you at 7, 8, 9%. If you want a car loan, maybe it's 13%. You get the picture, right? They take your money, they give you a little bit, and then they invest it elsewhere to make more money. And in the US, they have a fractional banking system. So what that means is that for every dollar that is deposited in the bank, they've only got to keep 10 cents and they can lend out 90 cents. So put another way, if for every $1 million they've got in the bank, they don't need to keep $100,000. They lend out $900,000. So that means $900,000 of their customers' money is never in their bank vault. It's out there being invested. It's out there trying to make money for the bank. In Australia, we don't even have a fractional banking system. That was abolished last century. Instead, a bank only needs to hold in reserve what it thinks it needs to compensate for any potential losses. And that's again only a fraction of the money that people deposit with the banks. And then when it goes wrong, what happens? You see situations like what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank. Thankfully, the Federal Reserve stepped in to guarantee everyone's deposits. But what would have happened if they didn't do that? Well, so many people's savings would have just disappeared overnight. Right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard stories of people who've woken up and seen that overnight their share investments have gone to zero, their crypto investments have disappeared in value. But what's scary and what's become very, very apparent in these various economic crises that we're facing right now is that our savings are virtually at the same risk of disappearing overnight as crypto might be, or certain share investments, or whatever the case happens to be. So our savings are no longer as safe as we thought they were, especially if the government can no longer guarantee our deposits. But even if they can, you may not then think you can lose your savings overnight, but if you rely on savings to build wealth, and that's your sole strategy, you're still getting poorer. Here's why. Imagine you have $100 at the start of the year, and you decide that you want to buy something for $100, but you think it's smart to maybe put that money into a bank account for 12 months and then make some interest to then go and buy whatever this thing happens to be, and that you're going to have some money left over. Well, let's see how this works out. In January, you have $100 in savings and you can afford this thing that costs $100. Now, let's say the bank gives you 3% interest for the year. That means at the end of the year, this $100 is now worth $103. But what's inflation around the world? Let's say it's 6%. That means this thing that cost you $100 in January that you could afford, at the end of the year is now worth $106. And even though you thought you did the right thing by trying to save money, you're actually poorer because a thing you could afford in January, you can no longer afford at the end of the year. Okay, so if you think that you can put money in savings and that's your sole strategy to build wealth, not only is it a potentially higher risk strategy than you've been told, but the fact is that you actually get poorer for the privilege of taking on that higher risk because you're actually falling further and further behind in terms of what things are worth. So what can you do instead? I'll talk about that at the end of this episode, but let's now get to wealth building fallacy number 2, job security. Now, you're probably aware there's no such thing today, right? The days of working for the same company for 3-4 decades and then getting some significant benefits are essentially gone for most of us. But the economic crises right now globally actually show how the system is built to prevent job security for so many of us. Check this out. Here's an article that talks about how interest rates affect rents, but not in the way that most people think. But again, I want to draw your attention to a couple of key paragraphs. Here we go. Center for Independent Studies chief economist Dr. Peter Tulip said the relationship between rents and the official cash rate was difficult to pin down, but evidence showed interest rates had a more direct effect on unemployment and housing supply. The Reserve Bank of Australia is currently trying to raise interest rates to take some of the heat out of the labour market, he said. We have a record low employment rate, which the RBA thinks is untenable. So in other words, is all of us having job security a bad thing for the economy? Well, apparently according to the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, that is the case. And in the US, the Federal Reserve Chairman has admitted that at least 2 million people could lose their jobs if interest rates keep rising. And this was a surprise even to me because, you see, I used to think that yes, job security didn't exist because when companies are struggling or when they're trying to streamline costs and make more profits, that's when they make people redundant, fire staff, etc. Okay? But I thought it was a company by company thing. But what we are learning right now in 2023 is it's not a company by company thing. It's actually a systemic thing. The economy is set up in such a way that people need to be unemployed And for many of the rest of us, we need to be at risk of being unemployed in order for the economy to function normally and for inflation to be controlled. Talk about a system that's broken. So if you have this constant sort of feeling of doubt in your stomach about whether you'll have a job, that's not an aberration. That's actually how this system is set up. And so we need to know how to flip the script, and I'll share that with you in a moment. But first, let's look at the third and final wealth building fallacy, and that's relying on a pay rise. Here's an article that talks about how the RBA is trying to control how much of a pay rise most people get. RBA puts 3.5% lid on wages. Reserve Bank of Australia Governor Philip Lowe has sought to put a lid on wages growth of about 3.5% and warned regular pay rises of 4 to 5% risked entrenching higher inflation. Dr. Lowe flagged the need of real wage cuts, saying annual rises in the mid-threes was a good anchoring point for employers and unions, even while inflation was forecast to reach about 7% by year's end. So if you're wondering why it is that no matter how hard you work, no matter how much of a pay rise you receive, you are still struggling to keep up with the cost of living, you're still struggling to get ahead financially, it's not your fault. It's how the system has actually been designed, and it is a broken system. So then the question is, how do you get out of this system? How do you flip the script? Okay, and it's a simple 3-step system. Now, what I'm about to share with you is not financial advice whatsoever. Okay, I don't know your personal situation. And I'm also not going to tell you that you should immediately quit your job, or that you shouldn't work hard, or that you shouldn't save money. No, those strategies are going to work as long as they are simply stepping stone strategies to do more. Let me explain by going through the 3-step blueprint with step 1, get an active income source and maximize the income you get from that active source. Okay, so if that's a job, yeah, work as hard as you can, earn as much money as you can, push for the highest pay rise you can get. Okay, it's not going to help you create wealth, but it will help you get started. It'll be the foundation to create wealth. Then step 2. Spend less than you make. Now, I know that might sound very unfair with the cost of living right now being so high, with inflation being so high, but here's the thing, and this is a cold, hard truth that most people won't tell you, is that for almost everyone, you can never create lasting wealth until you spend less than you make. Now, whether that means you cut your expenses a certain amount, or whether that means you go to look to increase your income, maybe through a second income source so that your income is higher than your expenses, whatever you need to do, you need to find a way to keep some of that money that you're earning and put it into savings, not as a wealth building strategy, no, but in order to then be able to move to step number 3. And step number 3 is to multiply your savings by investing it into assets that rise in value. Now, what asset class you choose, that's up to you. I'm a property guy. I invest in property. I run a buyer's agency that helps other people invest in property. And if you want help with investing in property, want to know how it all works, click the link in the description to get a copy of my book totally for free. But if you're not a property person, that's fine too. But what you need to do is pick an asset class that you like and find a way to take that money that you've saved, put it into assets that rise in value. Because for most people, the only way you're going to be able to break free of this broken economic system that we have is by investing in assets that rise in value over time and eventually give you a passive income. Good luck.